Hey, this is CIDUP. My name is Brendan, and today I'm going to be taking the political compass test. Before we start, I'm going to read this. It says, please note that this isn't a survey and these aren't questions, they're propositions. To question the logic of individual ones that irritate you is to miss the point. Some propositions are extreme and some are moderate. That's how we can show you whether you lean towards extremism or moderation on the compass. Your responses should not be overthought. Some of them are intentionally vague. Their purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind, measuring feelings and prejudices rather than detailed opinions on policy. Page 1 of 6, just a few propositions to start with concerning no less how you see the country and the world. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I'm going to say I strongly agree. Me personally, anytime that I can put the benefits of directly helping people in front of relying on corporations to do something, or the benefits of corporations, that's just kind of my viewpoint on that kind of stuff. So I'm going to say strongly agree for that. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I'm going to say just a regular disagree. I wouldn't support my country on an issue if they did something wrong. So no one chooses his or her country or of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I'm going to disagree. I think if someone wants to be proud of the country that they are born in, they move to, both, it doesn't, that's my view on that. Our race has so many superior qualities compared with other races. So I'm white, but regardless of my race, I don't think that any race is superior. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm going to say disagree. I'm just going to say regular disagree. If my enemy is doing something bad because they're a bad person, and the enemy of them is also, I would assume, bad, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're my friend. I would only want to befriend people who are good people. I wouldn't befriend people based on whether or not they're enemies of people that I am enemies with. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I'm going to strongly disagree. If you have an international law and we are defying it, what's the point of having the international law, and how can we expect others to abide by it? There's a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I'm going to say agree. Yeah, it's not great that stuff that should be serious is has such an entertaining spin on it as that it's covered. Page 2. Now for the economy, we're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. Very funny test. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I'm gonna say agree. I think that we're segregated and stuff, and where people are in the United States. Or I'm from the United States, so that's what I'm talking about with all these questions. But I feel like, despite the segregation that is still happening in our society, I feel like I personally feel like those that are super wealthy are in their own they're even more segregated. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I'm going to strongly disagree because, like I said, helping people over businesses, I see inflation as a corporate word, and seeing inflation as more important than people who don't have jobs. Don't agree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation, as you can assume I'd probably say, and I do say, strongly agree. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. I'm a sociology major, and I am aware that this is a quote by Karl Marx, who I think by law I'm not allowed to disagree with. No, but this quote is in regards to access to capital and making it so that everyone has more access. So I'm going to agree with that. The freer the market, the freer the people. Strongly disagree. Again, it's placing economic business stuff before people, so I'm going to disagree with that. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I'm going to agree. There's places in our society that still don't have access to clean drinking water. I believe Flint doesn't, and there's places around the world that don't have access. So it's kind of weird how we have like luxury water uh, being sold here while we have places in the world and in our own country that people don't have access. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I'm going to disagree, although I've been reading about this recently. I just don't know how to avoid potential violent conflict or chaos if there isn't like deeds and stuff. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I'm going to say disagree because I think it is kind of weird and messed up that people are able to make so much money just from having money, like their money makes money. But I don't agree that they necessarily are contributing nothing. They could be contributing, and then just as a side, their money is making money for them. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I'm going to say strongly agree. This has to do with like importing stuff from other countries, and protectionism is promoting more internal domestic stuff as opposed to importing from other countries. And I think trying to conduct business in your own country when possible is sometimes necessary. So I'll say strongly agree. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. I strongly disagree. I think that the workers of a company are undervalued and under thought about because so much of the emphasis is put on the shareholders. The rich are taxed too highly. I'm going to strongly disagree. I think they're not taxed enough. I think people should... My new number now is I don't think people should make more than $1 billion a year. So call me radical, but those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. So I'm going to say agree with this. Not... I think the scenario that I have in my head is like if we had a system where everyone did have equal access, I would be fine with there being like private doctors or like private stuff like on a small scale that like the incredibly wealthy could have access to that, I guess, if it's not like a burden on, like it's not taking away qualified people that would be able to serve and perform those kinds of stuff for regular people. But that's something that I might, in the future disagree with. That's just where I'm at right now. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I'm going to say disagree with this because I just want the government to regulate business. I don't want the government to necessarily be like in charge of what is and is not misleading. I just don't know where the line is. Like what comes to mind for me is like a pizza place that says, "Oh, we have the best pizza in the world." So it's like a situation where the government like taxes that business more because they are misleading people. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I'm going to say I strongly agree. And what comes to mind for that is like Walmart, and Walmart's an American company. I would be okay with like Australia having their own version of Walmart, but I think it would be kind of insane if every country on Earth their go-to big store was a Walmart. I think why can't? I think that's something that each individual country could figure out for themselves. Now look at personal social values. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. No, I want women to be able to have the ability to make that choice for themselves, and I don't think that their life needs to be on the line for them to be able to make that choice. All authority should be questioned. I'm going to agree. I think a dynamic that happens is that you question authority, and you should be allowed to question authority, and then like, they can be like, no, this is my authority, and thank you for questioning me, but I think, like, the dynamic is, like, people question authority, and they should be allowed to, but that when they do, the authority gets, like, upset that you're questioning them. So I think, a dialogue or, like, a circumstance where people are more able to question without being assaulted and stuff is good. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Strongly disagree. I'm anti-violence. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I'm going to disagree because I think it's important to preserve certain stuff. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I'm going to say disagree. Like, you have to understand, I don't necessarily know what the right answers for all of this kind of stuff is yet, but my thinking for this is that when you're a kid, you need to become more mature, and I think that the way to do that early on is to go to class and, learn how to be quiet, wait your turn, raise your hand, watch the person that's listening, all that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I think that our school system needs to be reformed, but I don't think that not making kids go to school is necessarily going to be very great. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Strongly disagree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I'm going to say disagree. I'm not a parent, but I'd like to think that you can discipline or, instill certain lessons into your kids without, hitting them. But something that I think about is I wonder if spanking a kid is really as bad as, isolating them in a room for however much time, and stuff like that. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I agree. I think people lie. People lie, kids will lie. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I strongly agree, and I think that everyone in jail, this is me going beyond the question, but I think that everyone in jail for nonviolent drug offenses should be let out and have all that stuff off their record. The prime function of schooling should be equip the future generation to find jobs. I'm going to say disagree. I might be, overly taking this too literally, but I think there should be more of an emphasis on people creating jobs and not just finding jobs and just becoming a cog in the system. People with serious inheritable diseases should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. That's so weird to think that the government would have the ability of telling who can and can't reproduce. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I'm going to say strongly disagree. There has to be more important things than that. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. As a sociology major, I have to agree with that. Everywhere in every society is just where they're at. I don't think it would be fair for people today to go back to the colonists in America and call them savage because they did something slightly different than what we do today. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Unless I disagree. Just because I think not giving people support under any circumstances a weird thing to kind of say that they should not expect society support because they're, I guess, lazy is what they're trying to get at here. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I'm going to say disagree. I think that people should be able to... I think thinking about bad stuff is good for your character and can really be illuminating to you, to people, It's like that movie Inside Out, and it's the sadness is part of us, and it's equally as important as joy. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country, and I strongly disagree. There's no scale of integration, so it's kind of dumb. What's ultimately good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for us. I'm going to say strongly disagree again. putting corporations in front of people, usually, in my view, not a great thing. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I'm going to say strongly disagree. I actually think that we need public-funded news broadcasting. How I see the wider society. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I'm going to strongly agree. I think we're being overly surveilled, whether it's the Patriot Act or any of that kind of stuff. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. This is a tricky one because I kind of want to agree because it literally would make things faster, but in a system where it's like a one-party state, where it's like the other way around, I would wish that there were people to like dissent to bring new ideas, and I think that having new ideas and having people who think differently than you forces the people that are like in the powerful position, like the people who are the majority in that one-party state, to have to constantly evolve and make sure that they're serving the public. So I'm going to disagree, because I think having that dissent is more important than making sure that things just get passed really quickly. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I think that's a bad argument. So I'm going to strongly disagree. I think that they shouldn't be surveilling us as much. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I'm going to say disagree. Strongly disagree, sorry. Just because I'm not okay with the state being able to murder people. And then there's also, I believe, a statistic that 4% of people who are that get the death penalty they end up being innocent. So not having the death penalty gives them time to, clear their name in those instances where they were convicted wrongfully. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I'm going to strongly disagree. I feel like who's in charge of the person at the top, so it's like kind of fundamentally flawed. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. I'm going to strongly disagree. Why are you coming at art people, bruh? In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No, the point should be to rehabilitate people to get them back in society, in my view. It's a waste of time to try and rehabilitate some criminals. So I think, I'm going to say agree, just because I think people should be given a chance to rehabilitate. They shouldn't try and force rehabilitation upon you if you're clearly not going to do it. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Strongly disagree. It's like I just don't want to put certain people above certain people. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Strongly disagree. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I'm going to say strongly agree. I'm sure that's happening. Would not be surprised. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Trust me, so I'm only 22 and I am not a fan of the establishment right now, so maybe it's I'm immature kind of thing, but I don't think making peace with the establishment is the answer. These are propositions on religion. So I'm an atheist, so just understand that that's my mindset going into these questions. I don't. Hopefully, you're not offended by what I say. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. It's fake. You cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree. Religion is fake. So to say that only those with religion are moral, wow, that's a great stretch. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Strongly disagree. I think that, having government or, having systems in place that are run by your government or whatever is a lot more reliable than just like donating money to a church and then that church willy-nilly giving, haircuts to the homeless or something. Like, I think having the systems in place is more beneficial. Some people are naturally unlucky. I don't think that luck is a thing, so I'm going to strongly disagree. And it is important that my child's school instills religious values. I'm going to strongly disagree because I think there should be a separation of church and state. And then finally, this last one was on sex. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I'm going to strongly disagree. I'm 22 and I am not married, and I would like to believe I'm not extremely immoral. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I strongly agree that they should not be excluded. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. I strongly agree. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no state of the business. I strongly agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I strongly disagree. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I'm going to say strongly disagree, I think. The only way to get to a point where we are, have the best understanding is for there to be openness. So let's see where I stand. This is, just talking about, the normal way that people think about politics, left and right. And then this is, a different scale where it's left and right, but it also assesses your libertarian and authoritarian. Clearly, and, obviously left is liberal, right is conservative, and authoritarian is, government is in control of stuff, and libertarian is, the government has a more hands-off approach to stuff. It's my, simple definition of of that. And then, so this is where I'm placed on this map. But I'm surprised that I'm down here. I feel like I've seen stuff where it's Social Democrats and stuff is over here, like this block right here. So it's crazy that I'm there. So I'm going to open this in a new window, and I'm going to now compare this to candidates that are in the 2020, or that were in the 2020 presidential cycle, but this has both Republican primary people, Democratic primary people, and people from the third parties. So this is everyone from this current election cycle, and as you can see, I am closest to... So really the only one that's the closest would be Hawkins, which his name's Howie Hawkins, and he's, I believe he's going to be the Green Party candidate. I'm not sure. He's actually the person who I have been thinking about supporting in the 2020 race. So yeah, the whole Democratic primary cycle I have been supporting Bernie Sanders, so it's interesting to see where he is placed on this. And this is not them being placed, I should say, it's not being placed from they took the exam and this is where they are placed. They have people who analyze their speeches, manifestos, and voting records, and then they place them on this chart accordingly. So again, so I'm closest to Howie Hawkins. I supported Bernie. This is where everyone else is. It's kind of crazy. Trump is right here, so I'm about here. Howie Hawkins there. He's the one I'm closest to. But I think what's interesting is that if you were to mirror this across, I would technically be the closest to being the opposite. I'm very close to being the complete opposite of Trump, and in fact, of all the candidates on this, he is the person that is the closest to the complete opposite of what I am. So that's interesting. So I want to get a little bit more into this. So now, this is a breakdown of the 2016 electorate. So the blue dots... So the scaling is different. The other scale was from -10 to 10, and this is from -1 to 1. So you can make that adjustment in your mind. So yeah, so the blue are where they are placed on the political compass, and then they were people that voted for Hillary Clinton, the red are people that voted for Trump, and the yellow are the people that were independent. And it's interesting because, Trump is further to the right than most of the people that voted for him. Well, this is what I'm trying to show, is that Joe Biden is right here compared to Donald Trump, which is absolutely crazy. And we can pull up the 2016 dot, and that's, I don't know how accurate this is, but it is kind of crazy, where Hillary Clinton is placed compared to Donald Trump. And even crazier is to think that these blue people were voting for someone who was placed, like, here, and these red people who are placed here were voting for someone who was placed, like, here. So it makes me think that, like, people in society are more liberal than the politicians that are running to represent them, which is interesting. And that's just my interpretation of that. So this next thing is, there are many, interpretive breakdowns of that political chart. So if I was to place myself from this, so apparently I am eco-anarchism, according to this one. This is like the most detailed one that I could find online. I thought this was funny. This is the least detailed one, but it's also supposed to be a joke one. And according to this one, I am a lazy 3-year-old's description of an ideal society. So that's comforting. And this is the one that I'm going to be looking at the most seriously, just because I like this idea that they've divided it into these individual squares, and then they've also kind of broadly labeled all of those squares within it as its own category. So if I was to, again, put my numbers, so I'm about right here, which is democratic confederalism. And when you look into democratic confederalism, and democratic confederalism is in this larger subset of libertarian socialism. So I'm gonna this is just me diving into just trying to figure out, because I was unfamiliar with this term. I had identified as just progressive. That was the new term that I was calling myself. So this is saying I fall into this camp, and I'm going to look into that, which was an ideology which is started by this guy, which is interesting because he apparently is somewhat controversial, but I watched a video about him on YouTube, and nothing, his policies and his ideology doesn't seem that bad. It just seems as though he's been painted in a bad light because his movement had taken part in killings of people. He's from the Middle East. He's a Kurd, so it's that whole dynamic there I found is extremely complicated, believe it or not. The Middle East is complicated, guys. So I'm just going to read this, which is the definition of democratic confederalism. Is a system of popularly elected administrative councils allowing local communities to exercise autonomous control over their assets while linking to other communities via a network of confederal councils. Decisions are made by communes in each neighborhood, village, or city. All are welcome to partake in the communal councils, but political participation is not mandated. There is no private property, but rather ownership by use, which grants individuals usage rights to the buildings, land, and infrastructure, but not the right to sell and buy on the market to convert them to private enterprises. The economy is in the hands of the communal councils and is thus, in the words of Bookchin, great name, neither collectivized nor privatized. It is common, and the main tenets of democratic confederalism are feminism, ecology, and direct democracy. And it's interesting because this guy, his feminist ideology, this is one of the reasons that I thought he was interesting, was that and that I have a hard time believing that he's really an awful person, although killing people is not great, and I don't recommend it, is that he said that your society is not free until the women in your society are free, which I think is a cool point. So there's some words, and this is all very complicated. I didn't know much about any of this, so I looked into democratic confederalism a bit more. And it brought up, right here, right off the bat, it's democratic modernity, which I didn't know what that was. So right off the bat, this gets into capitalistic. It essentially says that democratic modernity is the opposite of capitalist modernity. So to understand that, I didn't know what that meant. So capitalist modernity, we understand the consolidation of the market as the dominant system in societies, where everything is measured by its economic value. Focus is therefore placed on the material society, leaving aside ethical and moral values which are necessary in order for a society to exist. The current application of the market system, which has spread to all realms of life and society, is based on two elements that have managed to become hegemonic: the positivism and the nation state. So, democratic modernity, on the other hand, is therefore consists in overcoming this hyper-materialistic era, laying its foundation precisely on the ethical values and democratic practices that are nonetheless underlying in our society. To achieve this stage, the Kurdish liberation movement, which is what this guy was, there's his picture, he was the leader of that movement. I believe the group was I think it's the PKK. It does not merely give a theoretical definition of what society should objectively do. The new ideology that emerges from this paradigm avoids the positivist mentality, the totalitarianism of the nation-state. The political organization is therefore positioned not as a vanguard outside of society, but as a subject of transformation from within, seeking to show the praxis of what being a democratic society means. So that's complicated. Let's go back to this. It says democratic modernity replies to the universalist, linear, progressivist, and determinist methodology deployed by the modern nation-state to achieve the homogenization of herdification of society with a pluralist and probabilistic methodology that enables the visibility of democratic society. It develops its alternative through its openness to different political formations, its multiculturalism, its anti-monopolist stance, its ecological and feminist attributes, and its economic structure that is grounded on satisfying society's fundamental needs and societal disposition, as opposed to capitalist modernity's nation-state. Democratic confederalism is democratic modernity's political alternative. So that does not even also make sense necessarily. But my interpretation is that they're coming together based on, and this is the rest of the quote, but they're coming together based on all languages, all ethnicities, all religions, all where you're located. Everyone's coming together and everyone's having a direct say in what is occurring. So I think it's more of a direct, I don't know if they, what ends up happening in terms of who is in charge of these councils and stuff that they're talking about, and what kind of a process they would have in terms of leadership, and if there would be some sort of higher level of leadership, or if everything is just kind of, referendum kind of based. But there's that. It's complicated. I don't know if I'm going to have to look into that more and see if that's actually, the thing is, even though it placed me in confederal democracy, something that I am kind of going to be looking into for myself is looking into a lot of these things that are surrounding this, other graphs. This one doesn't have the same things in this kind of area, so looking at other graphs, looking at different ideologies, seeing which one I ultimately do agree with and what I think is best. And just to comment on that larger group that this was a collective of, it was that libertarian socialism. And down here we have the definition of that. Libertarian socialism is a Western philosophy with diverse interpretations, although some general commonalities can be found in its many incarnations. It advocates a worker-oriented system of production and organization in the workplace that in some aspects radically departs from neoclassic economics in favor of democratic cooperatives or common ownership of the means of production. They propose that this economic system be executed in a manner that attempts to maximize the liberty of individuals and minimize concentration of power or authority. Adherents propose achieving this through decentralization of political power and economic power, usually involving the socialization of most large-scale private property and enterprise while retaining respect for personal property. Libertarian socialism tends to deny the legitimacy of most forms of economically significant private property, viewing capitalist property relation as a form of domination that is antagonistic to individual freedom. So very interesting stuff. Just to see real quick, I wonder what the bordering stuff is. So this is social democracy. This is, I guess, where Bernie might be. Maybe he was. Let's see where Bernie was, guys. So yeah, Bernie is in this social democratic position in that little grouping, and I wonder what the differences between that and this social libertarian socialism really are. I think it must have to do with this like ownership of businesses and stuff, because I didn't really hear a lot about Bernie talking about that. So anyway, thank you for watching this. Thanks for learning about my views on stuff. Hopefully you found some of it interesting, and I encourage, people to take this test, see where they're at, maybe where you end up being placed surprises you. Not that where you're placed is like, the end-all, be-all of your political ideology. I don't think necessarily however many questions that test was, 60 or so, 50 questions. I don't think you can be put down necessarily in ink based on that many questions, and obviously people evolve over time and change their positions. And, I've taken this quiz a few times now in preparation and stuff, and each time that I take it, I get slightly different scores, so even just your mindset that you have while you're taking it can be influential in your results. Although, despite the slight alterations in my numbers, I was always in a very particular area. So yeah, thanks for watching this. Hope you guys learned some stuff. Hope you go forward and learn some stuff about yourself. Have a great day.